Hello everybody, we are back again today with our video covering the panic index and the just score I gave for every team, and it's all, kind of my opinion after 2 games of each round or of each series in the first round of the playoffs. Now before we start, I wanted to say please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me, new to the channel, but I also did want to say I apologize. This is not normally where I record. My wife's at work. I typically record out in the living room, but my dog was having a really hard time, and I was gonna just see if he was gonna be okay. He wasn't, and he was getting distracted by the fact that I was gone, and so I can't bring him out there, otherwise he tries to bark at the squirrel. So he is by the camera, and hopefully he doesn't knock stuff over. But anyway, we're gonna try to do this video, hopefully some others, and then just see how it goes. So this is not my normal thing. I know that I have not got the best stuff out there when it comes to, a studio or anything like that, but it is not usually like this. But anyway, bear with me as we go through each team and kind of the score I gave them for this panic index. So through the first 2 games, we're going to start off with the Boston Bruins, and through the first 2 games for the Bruins, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 10. I think it could be lower realistically. The series is tied. They are headed to Florida, and it is, a situation where things could get a little messy down there. Patrice Bergeron looks like he'll be ruled out through games 3 and 4, hoping for a return at game 5. For game 5, you really don't know what kind of series you're going to be having heading back to Boston after these games 3 and 4. So for them, the pressure is not completely on, but I did want to give them a score of 4 out of 10 just because, it could get out of hand potentially for them. Moving on for the Carolina Hurricanes, I gave them a 2.5 out of 10. They have a 2-0 series lead. My biggest concern for them is that it's been a close series. Sorokin has been a big factor in this series as well, keeping it close. And for Carolina, while it has been a close series, to know that they are just 2 wins away in their next 5 potential games, if it went to a 7-game series, it is good to know that they have that 2-0 series lead, and you feel like they probably feel good even if they could just get a split in New York and to have a 3-1 lead going back to Raleigh. So yeah. Colorado, the Avalanche, 3 out of 10 here. They have had some scary moments in this series. The series is tied ultimately. I do think for them it could be higher, but also this is a club that's been there, done that multiple times. Literally did all you could do and win the Stanley Cup this past season. So for them, I'm really not too concerned. Yes, Seattle had a 2-0 lead in the second game. They ultimately came back, and at the end of the day, I am going to bank my, push my chips in for a team that has won a championship and then also has that experience of dealing with playoff adversity. So it could be higher theoretically, but for Colorado, I'm not really sweating it. Dallas Stars, the series is tied, but they do not have Joe Pavelski, and they need to steal a game back. If they were, going to be in a spot where they were down 3-1 after 4 games, we might do a video something like this if this does well, and Dallas's score would be a lot higher. Yes, losing Pavelski hurts, but they showed that they were in a great spot to compete in this series and win in this series. So for now, I'm not going to, freak out for a lot of these series that are tied 1 apiece. It's not going to be a very high score for either side. Moving on to the Edmonton Oilers, I'm going to give them a 3.5 out of 10. They did lose game 1, but they should be up 2-0. And realistically, I think I could make it a little bit lower, but we did see last year how the Kings and the Oilers went to a 7-game affair, and it was tight at times. LA has some things that they're better at this year. I think they made some improvements in Edmonton while they have been hot. You really don't want to get in a spot where you go back and lose this series and say, wow, if we would have just held on to that lead in game 1, we would have been going on to the second round. So for them, I'm going to keep it pretty low pressure here. They were able to get a lot of pressure off of themselves last season by going on a run, so that's why their score is pretty low out of 10. Now, that being said, for the Florida Panthers, where am I going to put them? Personally, I'm going to have them at a 3 out of 10. You would think that they have more pressure on them, but I think they are just playing with house money. I think that's correct phrase there. The Panthers are a club that has been fighting for their lives for a while now, and they stole a game in Boston and did so pretty convincingly in a lot of ways. For myself, I look at this, if they could, really apply pressure here and get a 3-1 series lead, that'd be great, because if Boston takes one from Florida going back into game 5 against the Bruins up in the Northeast, I really don't exactly know how that'll go. But as of right now, you stole a game and you got to be feeling pretty good about it. Matthew Tkachuk said that was kind of a great scenario there. He said he would have liked to take a 2-0 series lead, obviously, but to go up and to take on the greatest regular season team in NHL history and have a split before going back to your place, that is good. Moving on to the Minnesota Wild, I gave them a 5.5 out of 10. I almost wanted to bump it up even higher, because you saw kind of what I said in my preview for the Dallas-Minnesota series kind of come to fruition, where Minnesota probably does not want it to be a higher scoring series, and Dallas is more okay with that. They ended up winning game 2, 7-3, Dallas that is, and for the Wild, that's not how they want to do things. I also don't exactly know what's going on in net for them. They have Gustafsson and Fleury, and Philip Gustafsson did pretty well in game 1. I don't know if there was a reason. I tried to find something online and I couldn't as to why he was not used in game 2, or at least he wasn't, the main guy. Fleury is, of course, a guy that's got a big legacy, but at the end of the day, I don't really care about names so much as results. And after game 2 for the Wild, it's clear that Fleury probably might not be the guy you throw out there. Also, you pair in the fact that the Wild are dealing with injuries to John Klingberg and Eriksson Ek. I would say that this is pretty concerning for them. Again, I wanted to make it higher, but for the series that it's tied 1-1, you did steal a game from the team that has the better record, so I'm not going to panic just yet for these clubs. But yes, that is one of the higher scores on here. As for the New Jersey Devils, this is the highest score, as you could imagine. They're the only team down 2-0 in this series, excluding the Islanders. But the Rangers have really put on a show, or at least they've been able to have a lot of balks and to outscore the Devils pretty handily through the first 2 games. And I actually gave the Devils a score of 8.5 to 10. I would say for New Jersey, it's time to panic. Yeah, because you got to go to New York. Of course, not a big trip, but you got to go to the Garden. You got to go and take on a Rangers team that just needs to win 2 of the 5 remaining games. And I am concerned for the Devils because they don't have a lot of playoff experience, some of their younger guys. And as of right now, the Rangers are looking like they're just going to beat up on their little brothers, if you will. And now is probably the time to panic, because if you go down 3-0, it's a 10 out of 10. So this is very concerning for them. As for the New York Rangers, 1.5 out of 10. You don't want to let New Jersey back into the series. I think if you give up a game here at home, it's not the biggest deal in the world. If it is tied going back to New Jersey, then you would start to say that obviously New York's got a lot more pressure on them. But as of right now, you look at the first 2 games, this is really great for New York. I myself and many others had questions about how cohesive would this work, and against a very good and deep New Jersey team, would they be able to take advantage of moments? They have been more than capable of doing so, so that's good for them. As for the New York Islanders, 7.5 out of 10. I wanted to give them more. I wanted this to be higher. They are down 2-0 in the series, but you look at this and you realize that they've been in both of the games. Sorokin has been able to be a big factor here. They went into overtime, and then Sebastian Aho, not the Carolina forward player, but the other Sebastian Aho, unfortunately had that goal there, or a factor in that goal for the end of game 2. Not great, and you have to win game 3 and realistically probably game 4, because Carolina is such a good group that if you lose this game, that is very concerning. But again, I would not say it's as desperate as the Devils, but we'll see. For the Islanders, my expectations were a little bit lower too, I guess, so I'm going to give them a 7.5 out of 10. Probably should be higher in all honesty. As for the Seattle Kraken, 4.5 out of 10. They have been in spots to win in both games, like I said, with the Colorado aspect of the video. But ultimately, they do need to win the next 3 of the 5 in this series. Again, so does Colorado. But looking at this, Seattle has to be able to take care of business at home and maybe have the dagger right there ready to go for game 5 if they're able to do so. It's kind of one of those situations where, again, kind of like Edmonton, you look at these games where if you go on to lose a series, you say, well, we really should have had game 2. We had a 2-0 lead, and we ended up losing the second game of the series that directly impacted what we were able to do, and now we're heading home early. But for now, considering who they're going up against in their first postseason appearance, I'm going to give Seattle a pretty low score. For them, I don't think the pressure's on as much as it could be. As for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I don't know. I put 4.5, but I think I'm going to go 5 or 5.5. This has been a really weird series. Game 1, they made everybody say, oh my gosh, Toronto is done. It's over. The Maple Leafs are not going to be in a position to win. And this is going to be another year where they lose in the first round. Tampa Bay then gets spanked in game 2. And I would say that the pressure could kind of be on them, but at the same time, a very experienced group like Colorado. The series is tied. They're going back home. And just like Colorado, I'm going to give them a lower score, but I will say they are playing the Maple Leafs, which are, in my opinion, a much better team than the Kraken. So that's why the score is a little bit higher. Again, Tampa Bay is good, but are they good enough to get past Toronto this year after it was a 7-game series last year? I guess we'll see. As for the Toronto Maple Leafs, again, another weird thing, because this is a weird series where you figured the scores could be lopsided or they'd be really close. I'm going to give them a 5.5 out of 10. They did lose game 2, or excuse me, they did win game 2 pretty convincingly last night, but they did lose Bunting in game 1 of the series. I know Bunting's kind of been moved around at times and is a guy that kind of reminds me of Brad Marchand. At points, he's a guy that is a really right at the edge player. His emotions get the better of him at times, and you would like to see him play when he's at his best and helping you out, but at the same time, losing him might not be the worst thing in the world if he is going to commit dumb penalties that were part of the reason why they lost in game 1. And I will say for Toronto, they have to, in my opinion, win one of those games going into Tampa, but preferably game 3. So, if you lose game 4, it's okay. But this is where you go into the Lions Den, if you will, in Tampa, and you got to be able to come out with one win. As I said, if we do after 4 games of the first round kind of panic index, I would expect for myself to put Toronto at like a 9 if they were down 3-1 against the Lightning going back up into Ontario for game 5. And then the final 2 teams in this panic index is Winnipeg, 4 out of 10. I look at the first game, and they were just dominant, especially 5-on-5. They had something like 75% of the expected goals for percentage, which is great news there. They really put it to the Golden Knights in game 1 and then lost in the second game. Really, that wasn't as bad as the score would indicate in terms of how it was close late. Mark Stone had 2 late goals in the third period. So for now, I'm going to give Winnipeg a relatively low score. You stole a game out of Vegas. That's good. Now you got to roll with that, and you at least have to win one of those games at home, preferably both, like I've said with most of these underdog teams. But for Winnipeg, the score is low just because they were able to, show that they can hang with the Golden Knights and kind of make people wonder about how good Vegas is. As for the final team, of course, the Vegas Golden Knights, it's going to be a 6 out of 10. They do have a lot of pressure on them, kind of like Toronto, about how far they can go, and they haven't really blown the Jets out of the water right now. It is a little concerning because as the series progresses, if Connor Hellebuyck gets hot and the Jets get some timely goals, or they keep it close in the game, next thing you know, they're going into overtime, you do wonder a bit about where Vegas is at mentally and if they can get the job done, because this is a good group. You know that they are very capable of going on a deep run, but as of right now, I will say the pressure's on a little bit, and while I'm not completely panicking, I would say that they probably need to, again, like Toronto, take game 3 of this series to know you took one back after the Jets took one from you. But we will see what are the panic index scores you'd give to maybe your team or some teams here. All of the teams, I really wouldn't mind how you did this. And again, I do apologize for doing this kind of in our bedroom after I typically do this in our living room. The dog's actually being great now. Of course, he's asleep by the tripod, and so I'm hoping he doesn't knock this over as I try to do more videos. Anyway, if you like this video and you want to see more content that is not, here by my bed, check out other videos, my playoff previews. I'll put those at the end of the video. Anyway, everybody, please make sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new, stay safe, have a great night, and you go with hockey, alright? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.